Hello, I'm Danny, and today Break.com's talk with Lee Faring, who is the Director of Litigation and Pro Bono at the Public Law Center. If you haven't heard of them, the Public Law Center, or the PLC, they are a pro bono law firm committed to providing access to justice for low-income and vulnerable residents of the Orange County in California. If you're new here to this podcast, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because today we learn about the importance of promoting access to courts. Hi, Lee. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
Our pleasure. Well, our podcast usually addresses issues around the world and sometimes they involve inequality and how organizations are helping to solve those problems. And today, our background is just this gap, right? Which is a way to say that some people were not receiving adequate or no legal help at all. So first, can you tell us more about what is the gap and what it entails, and how is the situation you find in Orange County right now?
Yeah, I can share a little bit with some numbers just to give sort of the broader perspective, but then specifically focusing on what my organization looks at locally in our county. So throughout California, for instance, 60% of low-income Californians have at least one civil legal problem a year, and 85% of them receive no or inadequate legal help. So the challenge that we have as a legal services organization is how to maximize the work that we can do to reach as many people as possible and to help with as many legal issues as possible. So we're in a county that is traditionally known as being a high income county. You know, if you're looking at the TV or the movies, you know, people think of Orange County as a high net worth area. But it's just not the case. So we have a substantial population of low income individuals spread throughout our county. It's a large county. And what we see is people coming to us, and sometimes it's that they don't know that the problem that they have is legal. So for instance, we have people who will come to us maybe because a friend told them to, or, you know, a neighbor or something like that. And it'll be, you know, maybe before a lawsuit is even filed, but that's okay. We can still help with those kinds of cases. So I think one of the biggest issues for us is helping people understand what legal issues are and how we can help. So we see, you know, we help thousands of people every year, thousands of families, low income families, older adults, immigrants, people seeking status in the United States, veterans across the board. And we're really trying to help people with their legal issues, but help empower them to be part of the process as well. And it's not easy. It's not a simple area. There's complications. There's lots of words that don't make sense, even to lawyers when we first start out as lawyers. And so we're really working on not only providing the legal services, but also educating people so that they know, you know, the sooner we can get someone to come to our office, the better. You know, we'd much rather than come to us, like I said, before a court case is filed. And I think that's a large part of why people aren't getting help, is that they don't know when to come to us. And so we're really trying to combat that and hoping that, you know, as a result of that, education and outreach work will actually be able to get better outcomes for our clients. We do serve people across, you know, a number of different areas of law. We have a family law project, immigration, consumer law, health law, housing, including landlord tenant and home ownership, a veterans project. And we have a project that helps low-income entrepreneurs, low-income small business owners, and local nonprofits who also serve the low-income population in Orange County, which is another way of sort of growing that network of the social services net, you know, to help our clients in more ways than just with their legal issues. So throughout those different types of law, there's lots of subsets, but the goal ultimately is to provide sort of a broad approach, like look at a client as they come into us and say, okay, what are the various things that are going on, and how can which ones are legal, which ones aren't, and what are the things we can help with, what are the things we need to refer out or provide just information and guidance on, and really hopefully help people get to a place where they can move to the next step. I mean, ultimately, sometimes we can't always completely solve the problem, but hopefully we can get people to the next step, which maybe is something that's not legal or is something that they can do on their own, depending on what it is. And so ultimately, the goal is to reach as many of the low-income folks in Orange County as possible, which requires the outreach and education that I mentioned, but also the cultural competency, language services, understanding what cultural barriers there might be to people getting to legal services, and then actually providing the competent, adequate legal services to help resolve the issues.
Oh, incredible! It's a very broad take on that, right?
Brilliant. It is, yeah. Yeah,
that's brilliant. And since you talked about cultural specificities, I gotta say that I was actually surprised to see that you have like one section, like how I think it's but for people seeking for help, you have it in Vietnamese, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was very surprising.
Yeah, Orange County actually has the largest Vietnamese population outside of Vietnam. We have a very substantial Vietnamese population in our county. Spanish is the primary language that our clients speak, but Vietnamese is second. We also have a number of people who speak Korean, Farsi, Mandarin, Tagalog, Chinese. Besides Mandarin, Cantonese, Chinese. It's Southern California. It's a really diverse area. There's a lot of people coming from a lot of different places, and people who've just grown up here. And so that part of it is really important because we've really recognized two things I think that we've noticed. One is that we need to be able to explain our services to people in different ways. We can't just think of one way to say it and that's the only way it's said, because that will turn some people off if we describe it in a way that creates maybe embarrassment or some other type of emotion that comes along with that based on their background. The other thing that we see, which is I think really frustrating, is we see the sort of the scams that take place within their own communities. We'll see for a while, a few years ago, there was a scheme going around where a group of folks in the Vietnamese community were encouraging older Vietnamese individuals to file taxes when they didn't need to, so that they could essentially like redirect their benefit, their tax benefit payment, whether it's a child tax credit or whatever else, to a different bank account and make, $600-$800 off of everybody. But when you add that all up, it turns into a large amount of money. But the problem was it was causing all kinds of problems for our clients, but it was viewed as a trusted source because it was within the community. They were on local Vietnamese radio. And so one of the things that we also need to do as we're looking at helping communities is find ways to counteract some of that and also be seen as a trustworthy source and not be seen as an outsider trying to come in or, and again, that's where the cultural competency comes in, of just knowing, sort of who the people are that we can talk to and how we can speak in a way that builds that trust of the community, really.
Which makes lots of sense. And I believe that you said one of the core parts of it is understanding what a legal issue is, right? So what it is, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I don't know that I can give you a definition. Because within all those different areas of law that I mentioned, I mean, it can be so many different things. So my training is as a consumer lawyer. And so this idea of consumer law includes people who might be dealing with debt. They might have somebody who they owe money to, whether it's an individual or a bank or someone else. They might owe money to them. It might be student loans. It might be a lot of different things. But even if there's not a lawsuit, there's something still that lawyers can do. Owing money is technically a legal issue. There's a contract that was involved that was theoretically negotiated. Whether it was really negotiated is a different story, but theoretically it was negotiated. There was an agreement on that contract. And then if someone is unable to pay, that's a breach of a contract. So that's technically a legal issue. But a lot of people think that I can't pay my student loans. like, why would I go see a lawyer about that? But there's reasons why we might be able to help and get, discharges or deferments or payment plans set up even before there's lawsuits involved. So I think that's just one example. And obviously that's just based on sort of my background. The other thing that comes up is in our health project, which I think is also interesting, is we have some clients who we have a transgender client who's seeking gender reassignment surgery, and the insurance is pushing back. Like, we're trying to figure out how to get that covered. And so that actually can be a legal issue in terms of looking at, the Medicare and Medi-Cal like regulations and identifying what kind of services are covered by them, which doctors are covered, and matching all of that up and getting the proper approval notices and all of that. So there's interesting ways in which lawyers can be helpful. And again, they can be helpful. I think a lot of people think lawyer and they think court, but that's not always the case. A lot of times there's a lot of work that's done outside of court where lawyers can step in and have an impact.
And actually maybe avoid going to court, right?
Ultimately, that's usually the goal. Ultimately, if I think, really litigators who make their living off of that may feel differently, but really, ultimately, especially for our clients, our goal is to avoid court if we can. There's times when we need it and we use it, and it's there for a reason, and it's necessary. But most of the time, in our cases, if we can avoid it, it usually is a better outcome.
Yeah, and who can actually ask for help from you? Because there is a range of issues you cover. You talked about them. But who can apply for help? So we're very similar to most legal services programs throughout the country, where we do base our services on income. So we have certain income levels, and that's why we can provide free services, is we specifically focus on folks who are low income. Our income guidelines are decently high. They I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it's based on family size and the median income for the county. So the benefit to that is, a county like Orange or San Francisco or Los Angeles in California are usually higher income counties because there's some high net worth folks who live in those counties. But where you go to the rural area and, the income is substantially lower. So so basing our income off our county actually helps us serve more people. But it's around, for a household of one, I want to say it's around $50,000 a year that they have to be below. So it's a low to middle income. There's definitely some folks who don't qualify for us who still are in need of an attorney. And there's some challenges with that. But we also have different funding sources, and different funders will allow us to use different income guidelines. So sometimes we can go over it for certain case types, or, sometimes we're restricted for lower on certain case types, but that's the main criteria. We do prioritize people who live in Orange County and who have cases in Orange County as well. Somewhat of that is funder related, and some of that is just practically that's where our expertise is, and that's where we know how to handle cases the best. So those are the main issues. There's a few types of law that we don't practice. We don't do anything in the criminal system. And we don't generally do things like personal injury, where there's often an opportunity to get a private lawyer who would take the case at no upfront cost. So the goal is not to compete with the private bar, but really to provide, to fill that gap that you mentioned at the beginning as best we can. Okay. And what is the best way for people who need help get in touch with you?
So most of our clients either come in through a community partner or they call us. We have a phone number. We don't have a hotline, but we have a phone number, and we have a network of, voicemails and phone lines within our office. So people who are in Orange County, can call our main phone number, and they'll get directed to the appropriate, project that handles their case.
Mm-hmm. It's very accessible. I can see.
Yeah, we try, and I think the other thing that is important to, we only have one office in the county. And like I mentioned, the county is really big. So the other thing that we do is we have clinics at various locations throughout the county. So some of them are in collaboration with medical providers, like medical clinics, community clinics. Some of them are at homeless service centers or homeless shelters. And the goal ultimately is for us, for us, the lawyers and our others, our support staff, to go to where the clients are going anyway. A lot of people have I don't want to have to call a lawyer if I don't have to. There's a real fear surrounding reaching out for legal services. So if we're just there, and as part of their regular, weekly check-in with a caseworker, they can also consult with a lawyer. It takes a little bit of that fear or barrier out of it. And so that's the goal. So we do also have clinics, in the south part of our county, in the north part of our county, and in sort of some of those, language specific areas. We have a project that specifically does focus on the Vietnamese population, for instance. And we work with community partners that also really focus on reaching out to the Latinx population. So, we do try as best we can. We probably could do more if we had more time, more hours in the day. But we do try as best we can to get out into the community as well. And that's, I think, another great way for people to get to us, is because it does feel, I think, a little less scary.
I can imagine. And can you share with us some of the outcomes or maybe the impacts you've seen in your work so far?
Yeah, one of the challenges with legal services is the hard numbers, right? Like, we can tell you how many people we helped. We can tell you, we recovered, $1.3 million for people this year. And that's great. But that doesn't really tell you like the human impact of the work. So I'm going to share a couple of stories of cases that we've helped work on this past year, because I think it doesn't tell you the broadest impact, but it gives you sort of the real impact on the community and on the individuals. So there's a couple of cases in our immigration project. We do monthly screening clinics where folks who are seeking status in the United States can come talk to us, and we can evaluate, okay, you might be eligible for this, or you might be eligible for that, or you're not eligible for anything right now, but hold on to this document and come back to us, and we can talk to you again once another year has passed, that kind of thing. So we had this young woman come to us. She was in her, I want to say her late 20s or her early 30s. And she believed that she was undocumented in the United States and was seeking status. And our attorney met with her and reviewed everything and discovered that she actually had citizenship. But she just needed to file a particular form. It was based on something and I don't remember all the details of it, but it was one of those things where, she'd been living her life for 10, 15 years thinking that, as sort of an adult understanding that system, that she, couldn't apply for certain types of federal aid, or that she was at risk of, deportation or detention. And it turns out once we got this document filed, she was able to, kind of just take a huge weight off her shoulder. And that's a really kind of minor legal, work that we did, but the impact on her life changed, it changed how she felt about applying for jobs or going to school or having a family, setting down roots, kind of all those things. In other cases in the immigration unit, we did a lot of work during COVID with getting families, getting individuals released from detention. There was a lot of public health issues in the detention facilities, and we were able to release, I want to say, close to 100 people. We were able to get out of detention, which means they got reunited with their families. We had people who ended up, returning to their family in Arizona or Baltimore, where they'd been stuck kind of at this rural place in California, really fearing for their lives, honestly. So those cases are always emotional. We have done a lot of work in the housing area. One of the things that we see a lot is the local public housing authorities who administer sort of the government subsidies for housing. They will terminate people from those housing benefits for reasons that sometimes are unjust. And so we'll push back. And so there's a woman that we helped recently who had been terminated from her public housing, I want to say a year and a half ago. And we ended up having to file a lawsuit in that case. We tried not to, but we had no choice. Eventually, we had to file a lawsuit, and we were able to settle it. And she was able to get her voucher back and now have sort of access to stable housing again, which again is one of those things that I think during the pandemic, people really learned that you don't take that for granted when you are forced to be, in your home so frequently. We I'm trying to think. I guess maybe some of the examples. I'll tell you one more. There's an older adult couple that we helped who are in their 70s, and they were approached by a salesperson at their home to take out a loan on their property, essentially to finance some work on their property. And they were completely misled as to how much it would cost and how they would pay for it. And so ultimately they were at risk of losing their house because they couldn't afford to pay for what this company had essentially charged them, and it was attached to their home. So if they hadn't been able to pay it, then the bank would have taken their home from them. And so we were able to resolve that case. Again, we did have to litigate there. We were able to resolve the case and get them enough money so that everything could be paid off and they could go back to living in their house and living out the rest of their life, which is really what they were looking for, especially as older adults. They just wanted to have that stability. I feel like there's sort of a theme actually that's coming through these stories that's, we're able to essentially get people in a place where they feel safe. They feel they have some stability, they feel safe, and they're not worried about what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day. And I do think that's actually a lot of what we're able to do with our clients. A lot of times they're coming in crisis. And so our goal is to figure out what kind of legal remedy there is to that crisis, if there is one, and if we can help with it. I did a lot of work in my early years in bankruptcy, which is actually a really amazing tool for folks when they're eligible for it and when it works for them. Folks who I had one client who he was getting calls saying they were going to come arrest him at his job because he owed this money to a credit card. It was illegal, the threats that they made, but they were, but that doesn't matter to him. He just was afraid that, my family, I'm going to go to work one day and not come home. And what are my wife and kids going to do? And we filed a bankruptcy case. They had a substantial amount of debt besides this one they were being harassed about. And when we finished the case, they just kind of looked at me and you just saw their shoulders drop, this was pre-pandemic where we were doing much more in-person work. You saw their shoulders drop a couple inches, their face, the lines relaxed out of their face a little bit. And they were able to focus on growing their family as opposed to, worrying about whether or not they were going to come home again. So I think that that's the best thing for us as advocates that we want to see is see people be able to live their life and be able to enjoy the day as opposed to feeling like it's, just not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. So those are just a few of the stories. Obviously, like I said, there's numbers we could give you, but I really think that the stories are more meaningful when talking about this work.
I agree with you. You can see more of what you're doing through the stories than just through numbers. You're very impersonal, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
How can people help you keep doing this job, this work?
Well, so we are, as you mentioned in the very beginning, a pro bono law firm. So what that means is we use volunteers to support our work. We have a small staff. We're a staff of about 50, but we work with over 1,000 volunteers every year, lawyers, paralegals, law students, undergrads, interpreters, kind of all across the board to help provide justice to our clients. So the first thing people can do is if they are, well, for us, if they're in Orange County, but anywhere, if they're, if they are involved in the legal system somehow, and there's a local legal services organization, they can volunteer. Volunteering is an amazing it's an amazing experience for the volunteers too, but it's also wonderful for the clients to be able to tell a client, I have a lawyer who's going to represent you and they're going to do it for free. And you can just see them, they're like, wait, but really for free? Or how much are they going to charge me? That's just not something that they're used to hearing. And so being able to say that and to be that volunteer is pretty incredible. The second thing is always donate. Financial contributions make a difference. One number that I will throw out there that we've been able to share is that for every $1 that's donated to us, we're able to provide $8 worth of legal services because of the way that we utilize volunteers. So there's an impact. There's a real impact. Our annual sort of value of the legal services we provide every year is about, I want to say it's $25 million. So it's a substantial amount of services that we're able to provide, and our budget's not that big. So it we are able to do a lot with the dollars that get donated to us. We have a website. All legal services right now are getting more and more calls than we can field. So I know everyone is trying to find ways to be more efficient, to be more effective, to put funds together to get more staff on board so we can help more people.
Thank you for sharing that information. I honestly hope more people can volunteer to help you out. And
I hope so too.
Yeah. It will happen. I'm pretty sure. And everyone else that is listening to us, please, if you can help and donate, because even from abroad, we can help out that situation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's amazing what the kind of the reach that we've been able to see, especially during the pandemic and being virtual. I mean, we've had volunteers even from out of state because of the way, as long as we're covering our licenses and all of that kind of thing. It's really amazing what kind of connections have been made, I think, across borders, and especially because we've had this access to more virtual, it really does make a difference, and it really does make it better for the people that we're working with. I'll give you one last example. One of the other things we did is in our family law project, there's a lot of expenses that come along with the cases. There's investigation fees, there's service fees, there's all kinds of things. And they were turning out to be barriers for clients. It was preventing them from going forward with their case. So we actually created a fund that specifically covers some of those costs for the client, so that those costs wouldn't be a barrier to the client being able to continue with the case. So sometimes, our funds are even directly impacting the client's cases, and the majority of it goes to us providing the services, but sometimes it goes even directly to the clients, just to make sure that they really are able to be able to move forward. Anyway, I know that's a little bit of an aside, but I think it's important to share that there's different ways in which the donations can go too when it comes to us.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for joining us today. It was truly a great talk and a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Truly our pleasure. And for you listening, also thank you. And if you enjoyed this episode, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app. That will show the algorithms that this is an important conversation, and more people can learn about the importance of the Orange County's Public Law Center. See you at the next episode.